The applause continued for a long time, but Marcus barely heard it. He was still sitting at the piano, trying to understand what had just happened. The music was over, but he could still feel it flowing through him. He had never experienced anything like this before. Slowly, the clapping died down. The room became quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. It was the quiet of people who had been changed by what they heard. It was the quiet of minds trying to process something they had never imagined possible. Marcus looked around the room at all the faces staring back at him. These were the same kids who had ignored him for years, the same kids who had laughed at his clothes and his shyness, but they were looking at him differently now. They were seeing him for who he really was, and then, in the front of the room, something extraordinary happened. Stephanie Collins, the girl who had never spoken to him, the girl who had made the cruel challenge about his playing, slowly sank to her knees on the marble floor. The room became even more quiet, if that was possible. Everyone stared as the most popular girl in school knelt in front of Marcus Williams. Her expensive dress spread out around her on the cold floor. Her perfect makeup was streaked with tears. "I'm sorry," she said, and her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm so sorry, Marcus." But this was not the theatrical apology that everyone had expected. This was not a girl trying to keep her word because she had been caught in a challenge. This was something much deeper and more real. Stephanie was crying openly now, not caring that everyone was watching. "I'm sorry for not seeing you," she continued, her voice getting stronger. "I'm sorry for all the times I walked past you like you weren't there. I'm sorry for making jokes about you with my friends." She paused and wiped her eyes, but the tears kept coming. "I'm sorry for thinking that having money and nice clothes made me better than you. I'm sorry for being so blind and so cruel." Marcus stared down at her, not knowing what to say. He had never expected this. He had played the piano to prove them wrong, but he had not expected anyone to really change because of it. "Your music," Stephanie said, looking up at him with red eyes. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. And I almost missed it because I was too stupid to see past what you were wearing." Other people in the room started moving forward. One by one, other kids who had ignored Marcus or laughed at him came up to the piano. Some of them were crying too. "I'm sorry too," said Brad, a football player who had once pushed Marcus in the hallway. "I never gave you a chance. I never even tried to know who you were." "That was incredible," said Sarah, a girl from his math class. "I had no idea. I feel so stupid for never talking to you." More apologies came from around the room. Kids who had never noticed Marcus were suddenly seeing him clearly for the first time. They were understanding that they had missed something amazing because they had been too focused on superficial things. But the most surprising moment came from Jessica, the girl who had started crying first. She walked up to Marcus with tears still streaming down her face. "Your music?" she said quietly. "It made me remember something I had forgotten." Marcus looked at her with confusion. Jessica was one of the most popular girls in school. What could she have in common with him? "I used to play violin when I was little," she explained. "I loved it so much. But when I got to high school, my friends said it wasn't cool. They said I should focus on being popular instead. So I quit." She wiped her nose with a tissue someone handed her. "Listening to you play reminded me of how music felt when I loved it. You reminded me of something I gave up because I was afraid of what people would think." Marcus felt his throat getting tight. He had not expected his music to affect people this way. He had just wanted to show them that he was not as worthless as they thought. "Don't give up music because of what other people think," he said to Jessica. It was the first time he had spoken since sitting down at the piano. "Music is too important for that." Jessica nodded and smiled through her tears. "I won't. I'm going to start playing again." Around the room, other kids were having their own quiet conversations. The music had opened something in all of them. They were talking to each other differently than they had before. The artificial barriers that had seemed so important an hour ago were crumbling. Marcus stood up from the piano bench. His legs felt shaky, like he had just run a long race. Playing with such intensity had taken everything out of him, but he felt better than he ever had in his life. "Marcus," Stephanie said, still kneeling on the floor. "Will you forgive me?" Marcus looked down at her. A few hours ago, he would never have imagined Stephanie Collins asking for his forgiveness. He would never have imagined her caring what he thought about anything. You don't have to stay on your knees, he said quietly. I forgive you. Stephanie stood up slowly, her legs stiff from kneeling on the hard floor. When she was facing him, she held out her hand. I would like to be your friend, she said. If you'll let me. Marcus had never had a real friend before. He did not know if Stephanie really meant it, or if this was just something she was saying because she felt guilty. But when he looked in her eyes, he saw something real there, something that had not been there before. He reached out and shook her hand. I would like that too, he said. The party was effectively over, though it was still early evening. Nobody felt like dancing or taking selfies or doing the things they had planned. The music had changed everything. It had made them think about things they had never considered before. Small groups of kids gathered around Marcus, asking him questions about music and about his life. For the first time ever, people wanted to know who Marcus Williams really was. They wanted to understand the person behind the incredible music they had just heard. Where did you learn to play like that? Asked David, a boy from his history class. I taught myself, Marcus replied. I practice on an old piano at school during lunch. That was you in the music room? Asked another girl. I heard someone playing sometimes, but I never knew who it was. Could you teach me to play? Asked someone else. Do you know any other songs? Have you ever thought about playing professionally? The questions kept coming, and Marcus tried to answer them all. It felt strange to have so many people interested in what he had to say, but it also felt wonderful. As the evening went on, kids started leaving the party, but many of them stopped to talk to Marcus before they left. They thanked him for the music. They asked if they would see him at school on Monday. They treated him like he mattered. Finally, Marcus heard his mother's voice calling from the back door. Marcus, are you ready to go? He walked toward the kitchen, followed by several of his new friends. His mother was standing by the back door with the flower arrangements she had picked up. She looked tired but happy to see him. How was your evening, baby? She asked. Marcus smiled at her, and she noticed immediately that something was different about him. He was standing straighter. His eyes were brighter. He looked like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. It was good, Mama, he said. Really good. As they walked toward the bus stop, Marcus could hear voices behind them. Kids were still talking about the music, still processing what they had experienced. He knew that Monday at school would be different. He knew that he would never be invisible again, but the most important thing was not that other people saw him differently now. The most important thing was that he saw himself differently. He had found his voice, and he had used it. He had shared his gift with the world, and the world had listened. Marcus Williams was still a boy who wore thrift store clothes and lived in a small apartment. But he was also a musician who had just given the performance of his life. He was someone who had learned that true talent could not be hidden forever. He was someone who had discovered that being different was actually being special. As the bus pulled up to take them home, Marcus's mother squeezed his hand. I'm proud of you, she whispered. I'm proud of me too, Mama, Marcus replied. And for the first time in his life, that was completely true. The silence in the room was complete. Marcus had never heard anything so quiet. Even the sounds from outside seemed to have stopped. Every person in the room was frozen, staring at him like they had never seen him before, and in a way they had not. For the first time in his life, Marcus Williams was not invisible. He was not the weird kid in thrift store clothes. He was not the boy who ate lunch alone. He was a musician, and everyone in the room knew it. Marcus looked around at the faces staring back at him. Some people had tears in their eyes. Others looked confused, like they could not understand what had just happened. A few were still holding their phones, but they had forgotten to record anything. In the back of the room, a girl named Jessica started to cry. She was one of the popular kids, always laughing and having fun. But now she was wiping tears from her cheeks with her expensive manicured nails. That was beautiful, she whispered. Her voice was so quiet Marcus could barely hear her. Other people started to move and breathe again, but nobody was talking loudly like before. It was like the music had changed something in the air, made everything more serious and real. Marcus turned back to the piano. He was not done yet. There was more he needed to say, more music that needed to come out. He had never played for an audience before, and he was discovering that it felt different than playing alone. The music seemed bigger somehow, more important. He began to play again, this time choosing a song that told his own story. It started soft and lonely like a child sitting by himself. The melody was simple but sad, speaking of empty lunch tables and hallways where nobody knew your name. As the song continued, Marcus let it grow more complex. He added layers of sound that showed the confusion of growing up poor in a rich world. The music spoke of watching other kids have things you could only dream about. It talked about feeling different and not understanding why. The audience listened without making a sound. They were hearing something they had never heard before, the real story of someone they had ignored for years. The music was making them understand what it felt like to be Marcus Williams. Some of the kids in the room started to look uncomfortable. They recognized themselves in the music. They heard their own voices in the lonely melodies. For the first time, they were seeing what their world looked like from the outside, but Marcus was not trying to make them feel bad. The music moved from sadness to something stronger. He played about finding hope in small things. He played about the joy of discovering you had a gift that nobody could take away. He played about learning that being different was not the same as being less. The song built to a powerful climax that filled every corner of the big room. Marcus's hands moved across the keys like they were dancing. The music was so intense that several people in the audience started crying without knowing why. And then, slowly, Marcus brought the music back down to where it started. But now the lonely melody sounded different. It was still sad, but there was strength in it too. It was the sound of someone who had learned to be proud of who they were. When that song ended, Marcus moved into something completely different. He started playing Clair de Lune by Claude Debussy. It was one of the most beautiful pieces ever written, and Marcus played it like he had lived inside the music his whole life. This was not just technical skill anymore. This was pure emotion turned into sound. Marcus played every note like it mattered, like it was carrying a piece of his heart to everyone listening. The music painted pictures in the air. It spoke of moonlight on water and dreams that float just out of reach. It was the sound of beauty that exists even when life is hard. It was the sound of hope that survives even when everything else falls apart. In the audience, more people were crying now. Boys who never showed emotion were wiping their eyes. Girls who thought they knew everything about life were realizing they had never heard anything this real before. Even Stephanie Collins was crying, though she was trying to hide it. She stood by the piano with tears running down her perfect makeup, staring at Marcus like she was seeing him for the first time. Marcus finished Clair de Lune and moved seamlessly into his final piece. This one was his own composition, something he had been working on for months in the school music room. He had never played it for anyone before. The song was about transformation. It started with all the pain and loneliness he had carried for so long. But slowly, note by note, it changed into something hopeful. The music showed what it was like to discover that you were stronger than you thought. It showed what it was like to find your voice and realize that it mattered. This was Marcus's masterpiece, the song that said everything he had ever wanted to say but never had the words for. Every note was perfect, placed exactly where it needed to be. The music rose and fell like breathing, like a heart beating, like life itself. As he played, Marcus felt something changing inside him. He was still the same boy who wore thrift store clothes and ate lunch alone, but he was also something more now. He was a musician who had just shared his gift with the world. He was someone who had found the courage to be himself in front of people who had never seen him before. The final notes of his composition hung in the air for a long moment before fading away. Marcus sat very still at the piano, his hands resting on the keys. He could feel the silence behind him, but it was not the same silence as before. This was the silence of people who had just experienced something life-changing. Marcus slowly turned around on the bench to face the room. What he saw there took his breath away. Every single person in the room was staring at him with wonder and respect. The cruel amusement was gone. The casual dismissal was gone. Instead, there was recognition of something real and powerful and beautiful. And in the front of the room, Stephanie Collins was looking at him with an expression he had never seen on her face before. It was shame and amazement and something that might have been the beginning of understanding. The room stayed quiet for what felt like forever. Nobody seemed to know what to say after hearing something so incredible from someone they had never bothered to notice before. Finally, someone in the back started clapping. Then another person joined in. Within seconds, the entire room was applauding. But it was not the kind of clapping you heard at school assemblies. This was the kind of applause that said, "We are different now because of what you just shared with us." Marcus stood in the hallway for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. His hands were shaking. His heart was beating so loud he was sure everyone could hear it. The cruel laughter from the living room kept echoing in his ears. He could leave. He should leave. He could walk out the back door and wait for his mother in the yard. Nobody would ever know he had heard them making fun of him. He could go back to being invisible, just like always. But something inside him was different now. Maybe it was hearing his music called worthless by people who knew nothing about music. Maybe it was the way they laughed when they said his name. Maybe it was seeing that beautiful piano being used as decoration in a room full of people who did not understand what it could do. Marcus took a deep breath and stepped toward the living room. The room was full of teenagers dressed in expensive clothes. They were holding drinks and talking loudly. Some were taking pictures with their phones. In the center of it all stood Stephanie Collins, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Marcus's family spent on food in a month. She was still talking about the piano. "Seriously, though," she was saying, "what's the point of having talent if you're too weird to use it? I mean, even if that Marcus kid can play, who would want to listen to him?" More laughter filled the room. Marcus felt like he might throw up. But he kept walking forward. A few people noticed him first. They stopped talking and stared. One girl whispered to her friend. Then more people turned to look. The laughter started to die down. "Oh my God," someone whispered. "Is that him?" Stephanie turned around and saw Marcus standing at the edge of the room. Her face went white, then red. She looked like she had seen a ghost. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice not as confident as it had been a moment before. Marcus looked around the room. Every face was staring at him. Some looked curious. Some looked amused. Some looked like they were waiting for entertainment. "My mother is working here today," Marcus said quietly. His voice sounded strange in the big room. "I heard what you said about me." The room got very quiet. Someone in the back giggled nervously. Stephanie looked around at her friends like she was trying to figure out what to do. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said finally, but her face was still red. "You said if I could really play piano, you would kneel down and apologize," Marcus said. His voice was getting stronger. "You said I probably couldn't even play Happy Birthday." More whispers went around the room. People were taking out their phones. This was the kind of drama that would be all over social media in minutes. Stephanie looked trapped. She had made her challenge in front of everyone, and now everyone was waiting to see what she would do. She could not back down without looking weak, but she also had not expected Marcus to be there to hear it. "Fine," she said, lifting her chin. "You want to embarrass yourself in front of everyone? Go ahead. But when you mess up, don't expect anyone to feel sorry for you." She walked over to the piano and stood beside it. "This is a Steinway grand piano," she announced to the room. "It costs more than most people's cars. So you better be careful with it." Marcus walked toward the piano. Each step felt like it took forever. The room was so quiet he could hear his own breathing. When he reached the bench, he stopped and looked at the instrument. It was even more beautiful up close. The black surface was so shiny, it reflected the crystal lights above. The keys were perfect white and black rectangles, waiting for someone to bring them to life. This was the kind of piano he had dreamed about playing his whole life. "Well," Stephanie said impatiently. "We're waiting." Marcus sat down on the leather bench. It was soft and comfortable, nothing like the wobbly wooden bench in the school music room. He adjusted his position and placed his hands above the keys, but he did not start playing right away. Instead, he closed his eyes and listened to the silence. In his mind, he could hear the music that lived inside him, the melodies that kept him company when he was alone, the songs that said all the things he could never put into words. When he opened his eyes, the room looked different. The faces staring at him did not seem as scary. They were just people, waiting to hear what he had to say, and he had a lot to say. Marcus placed his fingers on the keys and played his first note. It rang out clear and pure in the quiet room. The sound was better than anything he had ever heard. This piano was perfect, and it was ready to sing. He started with something simple, a melody he had written himself during lonely lunch periods. It was soft and gentle, like a conversation between old friends. His fingers found their way around the keys easily, even though he had never played this piano before. The room stayed quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet now. People were not whispering or giggling. They were listening. Marcus let the simple melody grow into something bigger. He added harmony with his left hand while his right hand played the tune. The music filled every corner of the huge room, bouncing off the high ceilings and coming back richer and fuller. He could feel the audience behind him, but he was not playing for them anymore. He was playing for the music itself. He was playing for all the times he had sat alone in the dusty music room, dreaming of a moment like this. The first song ended, but Marcus did not stop. Without pausing, he moved into a piece by Chopin that he had learned by listening to recordings on the internet. His fingers danced across the keys, finding notes he had never played on a piano this good. The Chopin was sad and beautiful at the same time. It told the story of longing and hope and dreams that seemed far away. Marcus had always felt connected to this music because it understood what it was like to want something you could not have. But as he played, something amazing happened. He realized that he did have something. He had this music inside him. He had this gift that no one could take away. Rich or poor, popular or invisible, the music was his. When the Chopin ended, Marcus smoothly changed to something completely different. He started playing a jazz version of a popular song that everyone in the room would recognize, but he played it in a way that made it sound brand new. This was where Marcus's real gift showed. He could take any song and make it his own. He could find the heart of the music and share it with others. His jazz interpretation was playful and sophisticated at the same time. It showed technical skill that most professional musicians would admire. Behind him, Marcus could hear people shifting in their seats. Someone whispered, "Oh my God," very quietly. But most of the room was completely silent, caught up in the music he was creating. Marcus let the jazz song build to a complex climax, his hands moving faster and faster across the keys. The piano responded to his touch like it was part of his body. Every note was exactly where it needed to be. And then, just when it seemed like the music could not get any more intense, Marcus brought it back down to something gentle and peaceful. He ended the song with the same simple melody he had started with, but now it sounded different, deeper, more meaningful. The last note faded into silence. Marcus kept his hands on the keys for a moment, not ready to let go of the feeling. This was what he had been born to do. This was who he really was, underneath all the shyness and awkwardness and thrift store clothes. He turned around on the bench to face the room. Every single person was staring at him with their mouths open. No one was laughing now. No one looked amused. They looked stunned, like they had just seen something impossible. Saturday morning came too early. Marcus woke up to his mother shaking his shoulder gently in the dark. "Time to go, baby," she whispered. "We need to be there by 7. Marcus rubbed his eyes and got dressed in his cleanest clothes. They were still old and faded, but they were the best he had. His mother had packed cleaning supplies in a big bag. She wore her work uniform and had her hair tied back. They took 2 buses to get to Riverside. Marcus had never been to this part of the city before. As they got closer, the houses got bigger and the yards got greener. Everything looked perfect, like pictures in magazines. The Collins house was the biggest one on the street. It was white with tall columns in front. The driveway was long and curved, made of smooth stones. There were fancy cars parked outside. Marcus had never seen a house so big. "Remember," his mother said as they walked to the back door, "we're here to work. Be polite and stay out of the way." Mrs. Collins met them at the service entrance. She was a thin woman with perfect hair and expensive clothes. She looked at Marcus like she was not sure why he was there. "This is my son," his mother explained. "He's here to help." "Fine," Mrs. Collins said quickly. "The party starts at 6 tonight. Everything needs to be spotless. I'll show you what needs to be done." The inside of the house was even more amazing than the outside. The floors were made of marble that reflected everything like mirrors. Crystal lights hung from high ceilings. Every room had beautiful furniture that looked like it had never been used. Marcus followed his mother as Mrs. Collins showed them around. There was a kitchen bigger than their whole apartment. There was a dining room with a table that could seat 20 people. There were bathrooms with gold handles and mirrors surrounded by light bulbs. But the room that made Marcus stop breathing was the living room. It was huge, with windows that went from floor to ceiling. Expensive paintings hung on the walls. And in the center of the room, like a beautiful black jewel, sat a grand piano. Marcus had only seen pianos like this in movies. It was a Steinway, the name written in gold letters above the keys. The wood was so shiny he could see his reflection in it. The bench was covered in soft leather. "Don't touch anything you don't need to clean," Mrs. Collins said sharply when she saw Marcus staring at the piano. "Everything in this house is worth more than you can imagine." Marcus nodded and looked away. But he could feel the piano calling to him. He wondered what it would sound like. He wondered how those perfect keys would feel under his fingers. They worked all morning and into the afternoon. Marcus mopped floors and dusted furniture. His mother cleaned bathrooms and polished silver. The house was already clean, but Mrs. Collins wanted it perfect for her daughter's party. Around 3 o'clock, Stephanie Collins came downstairs. Marcus was cleaning windows in the hallway when he saw her. She was even more beautiful up close than she was at school. Her blonde hair was perfect. Her makeup looked like it had been done by a professional. She was talking on her phone as she walked past Marcus. She did not look at him or acknowledge that he existed. To her, he was just part of the furniture. "The DJ will be here at 5, she was saying into her phone. "And make sure everyone knows this is going to be the party of the year. I want everyone talking about it on Monday." Marcus kept cleaning and tried to stay invisible. But he could not help listening as Stephanie talked about her party. All the popular kids from school would be there. There would be expensive food and a professional photographer. Her parents had spared no expense. As the afternoon went on, people started arriving to set up for the party. There was a team of caterers in white uniforms. There was a man setting up professional lights. There was another man testing sound equipment. Marcus and his mother finished their work around 4 o'clock. Mrs. Collins inspected everything they had done and nodded with approval. "Good work," she said, handing Marcus's mother an envelope of cash. "You can leave through the back door." But as they were packing up their supplies, Mrs. Collins got a phone call. Marcus could hear her talking in the next room. "What do you mean the flowers aren't ready? The party starts in 2 hours!" she was shouting. "This is unacceptable." She came back into the kitchen looking stressed. "I need someone to pick up the flower arrangements," she said to Marcus's mother. "The florist is across town. Can you do it? I'll pay you extra." Marcus's mother looked tired, but she nodded. "Of course. How long will it take?" "At least 2 hours with traffic," Mrs. Collins said. "You might not make it back before the party starts, but that's fine. Just leave the flowers on the back porch when you get here." Marcus's mother gathered her purse. "Wait for me here," she told Marcus. "I'll be back as soon as I can." Marcus watched his mother leave with Mrs. Collins. The house suddenly felt very quiet. The caterers were busy in the kitchen. The sound man was testing equipment in the living room. Nobody paid attention to one teenage boy sitting in the back hallway. As 5 o'clock came and went, the party guests started arriving. Marcus could hear voices and laughter coming from the front of the house. Music started playing. The party was beginning. Marcus stayed in the back of the house, trying to be invisible. But he was curious about what a rich kid's party looked like. He had never been to a party in his life. He wondered what it would be like to have friends who wanted to celebrate with you. Around 6:30, Marcus heard voices coming from the living room. The music had stopped and people were talking loudly. He could not help himself. He crept closer to listen. "Come on, Stephanie," someone was saying. "Play something on that beautiful piano." "I don't really play," Stephanie's voice answered. "It's just for decoration." "What a waste," another voice said. "That piano must be worth more than my car." "My dad bought it because he thought it made the room look classy," Stephanie laughed. "Nobody in our family actually plays." There was more laughter, and then Marcus heard something that made his blood freeze. "You know who plays piano?" a boy's voice said. That weird kid from our school. What's his name? Marcus something. Marcus Williams, a girl's voice added. He's so strange. Always sitting alone, never talks to anyone. I heard he plays on that old piano in the closed music room, the boy continued. Someone saw him in there once. Marcus pressed himself against the wall. His heart was beating so fast he thought everyone would hear it. Marcus Williams? Stephanie's voice was full of amusement. That creepy kid with the thrift store clothes? I bet he can barely play chopsticks. The crowd laughed, and Marcus felt his face burn with shame. He wanted to run, but he was frozen in place. I bet that weird piano kid couldn't even play Happy Birthday properly. Stephanie continued, her voice getting louder. If he can actually play something decent, really play, I'll kneel right here in front of everyone and apologize for every mean thing I've ever said about him. The laughter got louder. Someone started clapping. That's a bet, a voice shouted. Too bad he's not here to prove you wrong. Like he would ever be invited to a party like this, Stephanie said with a cruel laugh. Marcus stood in the hallway, his whole body shaking. They were making fun of him, and they did not even know he was there. They were laughing at the idea that someone like him could really play music. They thought he was a joke, but Marcus knew something they did not know. He knew what music felt like when it came from your heart. He knew what it was like to play until you forgot about everything else in the world. He knew things about music that money could not buy, and that beautiful grand piano was sitting just a few feet away, waiting for someone who understood its true purpose. Marcus Williams walked through the school hallway like a ghost. Other students pushed past him without looking. They talked and laughed around him as if he did not exist. He kept his head down and his old backpack tight on his shoulders. His shoes made no sound on the floor. At 16, Marcus had learned to be invisible. It was easier that way. No one made fun of him when they could not see him. No one asked questions about his clothes that came from the thrift store. No one wondered why he never had lunch money or new school supplies. He ate his sandwich alone in the far corner of the cafeteria every day. While other kids talked about parties and new phones and weekend plans, Marcus thought about music. The notes played in his head like a secret language only he could understand. After lunch, Marcus always went to the same place. The old music room at the end of the building had been closed for 2 years. The school said they had no money to fix it. But the door was never locked, and Marcus had found his way inside months ago. The room smelled like dust and old wood. Chairs were stacked against the walls. Sheet music lay scattered on the floor. But in the center of the room stood an old upright piano. Its wood was scratched and some keys stuck, but it still made beautiful sounds. Marcus sat on the wobbly bench and placed his fingers on the keys. This was his favorite time of day. This was when he could forget about being poor. He could forget about being alone. He could forget about everything except the music. He had never taken a piano lesson in his life. His family could not afford lessons. They could barely afford food and rent. But Marcus did not need lessons. The music came from somewhere deep inside him. His fingers found the right keys like they had a mind of their own. He played soft melodies that made him think of rain on windows. He played happy songs that reminded him of summer days when he was little. Sometimes he played sad music that sounded like all the tears he never let anyone see. The school day always ended too soon. Marcus would close the piano and walk home to their small apartment. His mother worked 2 jobs to pay the bills. She cleaned offices at night and worked at a grocery store during the day. She was always tired, but she always smiled when she saw him. "How was school today, baby?" she would ask. "It was fine, Mama," Marcus would say. He never told her about eating lunch alone. He never told her about the kids who called him names. He never told her about feeling invisible. She had enough problems. But sometimes, late at night, his mother would hear him playing the old keyboard they had found at a yard sale. The sound would come through the thin walls of their apartment. She would smile in her sleep, knowing her son had found something beautiful in a world that was often hard. Marcus dreamed of playing on a real grand piano someday. He dreamed of people listening to his music and understanding what he was trying to say. But dreams seemed far away when you lived in a place where the heat got turned off when the bill was late. One Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. Marcus was in his usual spot in the music room when he heard voices in the hallway. He froze at the piano, his hand still on the keys. "The Collinses want the whole house cleaned before the party Saturday night," someone was saying. "They're paying extra for weekend work." Marcus recognized his mother's voice answering. "I'll take any extra work I can get. Times are hard right now." His mother was talking to Mrs. Rodriguez, who ran the cleaning company. Marcus held his breath and listened. "It's a big house in Riverside," Mrs. Rodriguez continued. "Fancy place. The daughter is having some kind of birthday party. Rich kids, you know. They want everything perfect." "I understand," his mother said. "I'll do a good job. You always do, Maria. That's why I called you first. The job pays double because it's such short notice. You might need help, though. It's a lot of house to clean." Marcus heard his mother pause. "My son could help. He's a good worker. Bring him along then. Saturday morning, early. I'll text you the address." The voices moved away down the hall. Marcus sat very still at the piano. The Collins family. He knew that name. Stephanie Collins was in his grade. She was everything he was not. Popular, rich, beautiful. She lived in a world he could only imagine. Marcus had seen Stephanie at school many times. She always wore expensive clothes and carried designer bags. She was surrounded by friends who laughed at her jokes and copied everything she did. She was the kind of person who decided who was cool and who was not. He had never spoken to her. She had never even looked at him. To Stephanie Collins, Marcus Williams did not exist, and that was fine with him. He did not want to be noticed by someone like her. But now he would be going to her house. He would be there as the help, cleaning up before her fancy party. He would see how the other half lived. The thought made his stomach feel strange. Marcus finished playing and packed up his things. On the walk home, he thought about Saturday. Part of him was curious about the big house in Riverside. He had never been to that part of town. He had heard it was where all the rich families lived. Another part of him felt nervous. What if someone from school saw him there? What if they figured out his mother was the cleaning lady? It would give them one more reason to look down on him. But his mother needed the money. She worked so hard to take care of them both. If he could help her earn extra cash, he would do it, even if it meant being uncomfortable for a day. That night at dinner, his mother told him about the cleaning job. She looked tired but hopeful. "It's good money, Marcus, and it's just for one day. You don't have to come if you don't want to." "I want to help, Mama," Marcus said. "We're a team, right?" His mother smiled and reached across the small table to squeeze his hand. "We are a team. The best team." Marcus went to bed that night thinking about music and money and fancy houses. He wondered what it would be like to live in a place where you never had to worry about paying bills. He wondered what it would be like to have friends and parties and all the things that seemed so normal for other kids. But as he drifted off to sleep, the melodies in his head reminded him of something important. Money could buy a lot of things, but it could not buy the music that lived inside him. That was his and his alone. Rich or poor, that would never change. Saturday was coming, and with it, a day that would change everything. But Marcus Williams had no way of knowing that yet. He was just a 16-year-old boy who played piano in an empty room, dreaming of a world where his music mattered to someone besides himself.